How's it going, everyone? It's Frankie Martinez, and today I'm going to talk about the video that I just watched on YouTube, which talks about mental health for children. The video simply is called, What is Mental Health? Mental health explained for children for 5 and above. In this video, essentially talks about how we're processing information, the importance of it, how relatable it is to even physical health. And it talks about how to essentially handle certain situations and how normalized mental health should be compared to even physical health, which leads into my first key point, which is going to be at the 17-second mark, which essentially just talking about what it is. And it's relating to essentially the misconception that is related to mental health. So for example, it talks about how mental health can be directed towards, if we say mental health, like the word, for example, we're going to be talking about how it's going to be like a flu or something like arthritis, rather than it be just something that we talk about, like if we're talking about like lifting weights or going on a run or something that's very, very common, right? Other key point I would like to point out is at the 2-minute and 20-second timestamp. And so it talks about essentially emotional literacy. And so what that is how we are able to process emotions, that it would be really helpful to be able to display or to express our emotions properly. So for example, if we're sad, it's okay to cry. If we're angry, it's okay to express that we're angry, maybe not in a way that we're inflicting any kind of physical pain or altercation or anything like that, but just expressing the emotion in general is going to be important to be able to relay emotions properly, rather than essentially imploding with all this, like, I guess like a piggy bank, if you will, of these emotions and not being able to process them properly. Next timestamp I would actually like to bring out is going to be at the 3-minute and 20-second mark, which is going to actually express how to properly deal with the emotions that youth is dealing with. So for example, it does give a couple of different examples of how to deal with it. So for example, it talks about if we are upset, what we can do, which essentially is moving the energy, right? So if we're upset, doing something physical like drawing, which is something that's very common that relates to what a child would essentially already be doing. Maybe they're coloring in their coloring book, drawing their favorite character cartoon. Another thing would be physical activity. The majority of children, in my experience, have liked to go on a recess or something relating to that. So moving the energy and doing something physical that would be proactive, like shooting a basketball, playing baseball, going on a jog, things that promote physical health that would essentially allow you to also blow off some steam in a healthy way. This is my media impact section. And in this section, I'm going to describe the way that a child beliefs will essentially be changed from mental health is a bad word or a bad sentence into something that's going to be very positive, as well as the expectations of how to deal with those things. So the things that I really liked about the message that this media presented was, and it was multiple points where it described mental health being as common as physical health. So we hear a lot of descriptions and a lot of things that come with physical health, like, hey, you want to lose some weight, maybe we go on a run or a jog, or we do physical activity. And essentially the impact that this media is giving is that it is okay to also consider mental health as the same as you would your physical health. And it's not a bad word. It's not something that we're trying to essentially divert from. It's something that needs to be paid attention to. And it's just as important as your physical health, as your mental health affects your physical health. That's something that's described in the video. The one would be expectations of behavior. So processing information when it comes to when you're sad, when you're mad, when you're happy. So some things that are very important, which will segue into one of the core ideas within the chapter, is going to be the mimicry portion, or the chameleon We get this from a chameleon effect, which essentially is what is described as monkey see, monkey do. And it is important that the adult caregivers or other people that are around, maybe coaches, teachers, they also are displaying or showing essentially the characteristics that the children are supposed to learn. So for example, we talked about it being a normal thing to talk about potentially mental health. So saying, hey, are you upset? Are you happy? Are you sad? And if for example, the emotion is being shared, that the teacher or caregiver or whoever the adult is able to express that emotion effectively without it having some kind of negative effect. So the other one is going to be the expectation of the reaction, for example. So the expectation of the reaction is going to be something like, again, that is going to go into the chameleon effect. And why is it very important for the adult to mimic these positive outlets, such as, hey, I'm really mad. Instead of being mad, I'm going to do some box breathing. Maybe showing what that looks like would help it be more normalized, and it to be something that could kind of wear off on the youth, that this is how we process the emotion of anger. Thing with sadness, maybe if you're sad, expressing that, hey, I am sad, and maybe being it okay to cry or to show that effect that you are essentially sad, right? So these are essentially the expectations that hopefully the adults are also displaying, of one, that mental health is a thing that is important just as much as physical health, and then how to process the physical attributes or the physical things when it comes to the mental health. So if you're angry, how are you able to deal with anger without, being violent, essentially? Maybe it's taking a walk, maybe it's jogging, maybe it's doing some box breathing. That is going to be an example of the chameleon effect or social mimicry that we can essentially pass on to the youth. That would be a positive effect. So now I'd like to share with you my remix item, which essentially I do work with youth. I am a coach actively right now, so I'd like to actually demonstrate a scenario in which a coach would work with a youth athlete or individual, and how to essentially go about that right now. So I'm just going to kind of lay out everything. The scenario overview is a coach notices a young athlete showing signs of distress after practice. The coach initiates conversation, demonstrating empathy and prioritizing mental well-being. So here's a short little script. So this is, for example, the coach. This is myself. Hey, I noticed you seemed a bit off today. Is everything okay? The athlete will more than likely kind of answer like this, and they would say, I've been overwhelmed with everything, school, practice, and everything. Then you as a coach, I'm here to support you, not just as an athlete, but as a person. Let's figure out how we can balance it. And if we need to talk more or get additional help, I'll help you find it. So essentially, this is kind of going into also the video that I just viewed, which talks about if you're not able to process your thoughts, also find someone to talk to. This may be an adult or a trained professional. And the lesson plan outline, the objective is going to be the youth athlete learns to recognize emotional signs in themselves and peers, and how to ask for help or offer support. The key steps for the coach's actions, so this would be my own actions, would be to observe. So we're going to notice behavioral or emotional cues. We're going to engage. We're going to ask open-ended questions in a non-judgmental tone. So we're not going to be like, what's going on with you? So the tone of voice does matter, because if we're going into it with a judgmental voice, then they are less likely to open up about what's actually going on, and they would actually retract rather than trying to share with you. The last one is going to be support, which is going to be validate feelings, offer resources. Example would be a counselor, team check-ins, and then set up a follow-up. So for example, if the problem is a little bit greater than, hey, I'm overwhelmed at school, which is something more like, hey, we can just look at what you're doing, how we're essentially maybe managing time. Maybe instead of playing video games first thing when you get home, it's going to be, let's work on some homework, some advice. But if it becomes something more serious, then do refer them to a counselor, and then after that maybe do a weekly check-in where they can kind of like follow up and say, hey coach, I'm feeling great this week, or I'm feeling really bad this week. Maybe it's a better idea for myself to have some time to process my thoughts, maybe in between a rep or something something along those lines that would help process the emotion and deal with the emotion as it comes, and not just have them lock it up and not share that emotion. Then there's going to be a reflection activity, which is the athlete practices role play conversations, discussion on how they'd ask a friend or teammate about mental well-being. So essentially, it's also important that while we're doing this activity, you're also teaching them how to kind of do your role as a coach, I guess you could say, to kind of be a first line of defense when maybe the athlete hears something, and that way we could kind of jump on the interaction as soon as it happens, or the emotion as soon as it happens, rather than waiting for a blowout or something that's going to be very negative. Either way, my name is Frankie Martinez. I hope you like this presentation, as well as the presentation regarding mental health on youth, and we continue to grow together. See you guys next time.